Welcome to Who Has Time to Read, the show where your hosts Jeff and Adam, that's me, dive into the pages of our favorite reads from the last month. Each episode, we explore a mix of bestsellers and hidden gems, sharing insights, surprises, and recommendations. Whether you're a lifelong reader or just looking for your next great book, you're in the right place. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's turn the page on today's episode of Who Has Time to Read. Hi, and welcome to the July 2024 episode of Who Has Time to Read. This episode is brought to you by our sponsors, Ripples Media and Edgewise Media. I'm Adam Walker.
And I'm Jeff Hillemeyer. Adam, how you doing?
Man, I'm tired, if I'm being honest. It's been a long week. I'm real tired. But
you did something I've always wanted to do, and I'm going to tie it back to reading. But You took a drive across the country.
Yeah. So a buddy of mine, my childhood best friend, actually reached out to me, and he needed to drive a car and a dog from California to Atlanta. And he's like, "Hey, random question: do you want to fly out here? I'll buy your ticket and drive with me across the country." And I was like, "Of course I do. Like, let's do that right now." And so that's what we did. I flew into to John Wayne Airport, I think was it Orange County Airport or whatever. And we stayed in California that first night and then just cruised across, hit the Grand Canyon on the way. It was amazing.
Was it 3 days of driving?
I think it was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesdays, 5 days of driving. Yeah. The last 2 days were shorter because we stopped to see his brother on the way in Mississippi. So we had 2 5-hour days for the last 2 days, but on average we drove like 8 to 9 hours each day. And it really wasn't too bad. It was great.
Well, so here's the question. You've got your streak of reading for 1 hour every day. I'm super curious. I'm sure you kept the streak going. How did you on a trip like that? You and another guy driving across the country. Yeah.
So the first thing I did is I warned him that I would be keeping the streak alive because it's like, I think my streak's almost to 500 days in a row. Like I'm pretty close to 500 days in a row now. And so I give him the heads up. And then really I just got up, relatively early every morning and just immediate, like coffee and reading first. And we pretty much didn't leave until I was done reading. So I just made it the first party. Now it was different the last day. We had to leave at 6 a.m. local time. So I read last night at home instead of in the morning. But I was able to do it, and he was totally cool with it. One morning I might have also nodded off at the end of my reading, so I got an extra nap in, which was great. So
nice. Okay, good. I figured you kept your list.
Yeah.
Your ranking going. All right.
Yeah.
Let's jump into these books. I'm going to switch it up. You go first this time. Let's talk about what books you finished in the month of June.
All right. So the first, I'll go with the nonfiction one, and it's one I mentioned last time, but I'll give you a summary of it. It's called The Expectation Effect by David Robson. And so I did a little chat GPT summary of it because I find that helps my memory of it. And I probably should take better notes, but just a couple 7 quick takeaways that I just want to mention. One is mindset matters. I think it matters more than we realize. 2 is the placebo effect is a real thing. And so if you think something is going to help you, often it will help you. What was really interesting about that, one of the things was rituals. Like if you have a ritual that you do before something, like a tennis player will have a ritual before they do a serve, statistically, you do a better job of the thing you're about to do than if you don't have a ritual, which is interesting. The nocebo effect, which is if you expect negative things to happen, they can and do tend to happen. So your mind will, if you hear this drug has a 5% likelihood of giving you a migraine, just in here, because you heard that, you're significantly more likely to get a migraine than if you had not heard that, which is kind of crazy. So just knowing that up front is really helpful. It's important for performance and learning, health and aging. So this was interesting. So it talked about people that define old age as starting at 60 versus people that define old age as starting at like 70 plus, and their health at that time, it's in that 60 to 70 year. If you define old age as 60, your health is significantly worse than if you define old age as starting at 70. And so to a very large degree, like you really are as old as you feel, which is kind of interesting, but it also has effects on stress and resilience, and of course, behavioral change. So it was a really good book. I think it did provide a lot of tools, but really at the end of the day, it's just that if you expect, so for another example, if you expect, like if I expect this podcast to be mentally draining, then at the end of this podcast, I'm going to be mentally drained. Like that's just how it's going to be. If I expect this podcast to be life-giving and mentally enlightening and stimulating, then at the end of it, I'm much more likely to have a significant amount of additional energy.
So that sounds a lot like some of the Stoic things that you've been reading in terms of like setting your mind right. Did you find correlations between that?
I probably should have. I don't know that I made the connection, but no, I mean, now that you say it, like it actually does make sense. And I do wonder if Stoicism partly works well because of that exact thing. It's like you set your expectations in one direction and then, magically that's what happens. And so, I mean, it becomes self-fulfilling prophecy. And that's really, I think, what the expectation effect is about, is like self-fulfilling prophecy is much more of a thing than we realize. Mm-hmm. and no, like another great example of it that I thought was fascinating. And I think this would be good for you to know because you have kids, but so some kids will have test anxiety. And so one kid will have test anxiety and think, okay, well, I'm super anxious, so I'm going to do bad on this test. Another way to reframe that is to say, I'm super anxious, so my senses are heightened, my thinking is faster, and it's actually going to make me perform better on this test. And so by reframing it, then statistically, like in studies, like students that did that did perform better. And so it's all about sort of how you frame things, how you think about things.
Fascinating. I'm definitely going to use that because I got a lot of anxiety running around this house.
You and me both.
All right. I'll talk about one I finished. I talked about it last week. It's called Harass Hole by Lisa Bowman. It was a great, she shares a story of harassment in the workplace at United Way, actually global. And the process of that, the difficulty of it. I've read several books, sort of in that vein, and I always learn a lot from it and able to look back on maybe things I've experienced or seen that I maybe should have spoken up on. So it was definitely worth a read. And she's a very solid writer. And I don't think that's what she does by trade, but she's a good writer. So nice. Yeah, that was a good one. All right. What's next for you?
So the next one is a sci-fi fiction book that I got to recommend. It was great. It's called Spin. If you're a sci-fi nerd, it's very good. I'm very particular with my sci-fi. Like it has to be above a certain level for me to even finish the book. And this was good enough to finish the book and begin reading the next one, which I'm almost also finished with. So it's Spin by Robert Charles Wilson. And it was a really good, entertaining read.
Nice. You love your sci-fi.
I do. I love it. How about you?
So the other one that I'll mention that I finished in June is called The Lessons of History. It's by Will and Ariel Durant. It's a really good book. I loved it. It's like, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 shortish chapters on different aspects of history. And I'll read you, I pulled up one of my highlights here to give you an example of the type of content that this book hits. It's much, how do I want to say, headier than what I typically read. And I had to reread sections and chunks several different times, right, just to make sure I was like processing it. Let's see, where is that? Okay, so I think this was an interesting one, and it uses the phrase "men" to talk about mankind. So
right,
since men love freedom and the freedom of individuals and society requires some regulation of conduct, the first condition of freedom is its limitation. Make it absolute and it dies in chaos. So the prime task of government is to establish order. Organized central force is the sole alternative to incalculable and disruptive force in private hands. So part of what it's saying there is like, you want freedom, but in order to have freedom, you can't have total freedom. You have to have a higher power that makes sure that you can have your freedom. It talks about the United States. So the states want as much freedom as possible. Yeah. If there was no central government, right, then everybody would be invading each other's borders. There'd be no rules. And so there'd be no freedom. So that's just an example where then it will take that concept and talk about how throughout, the history of the world that has happened where, and it talks about democracy. It talks about religion. It's just a fascinating book. I expect I'll reread it. I've got lots of highlights. I'll probably put the highlights in a blog post or something, but I really enjoyed that one.
I may need to check that out. That sounds fascinating.
You can read my notes on it when I put up.
Yeah. I'll get the Jeff's version first.
Yeah, you can see what
Jeff's
you think.
Notes. Okay.
All right.
Like it.
This podcast is sponsored by ripples.media. If you're an aspiring author looking to publish your first book, go to ripples.media to find a community and publisher that can support you. This episode is also brought to you by edgewise.media. If you want to create a podcast for yourself or for your business, or you need help with content creation, go to edgewise.media to learn more.
Let's talk about books we're currently reading. Why don't you go first and talk about your two?
Yeah. So go with both of mine first. Okay. I got you. So the first is No Time Like the Future by Michael J. Fox. I'm listening to that one. It's read by Michael J. Fox. I've been just an enormous Michael J. Fox fan forever. And of course he has Parkinson's. My grandmother had Parkinson's for, 20 plus years, I guess the final 20 to 30 years of her life. So hearing him talk about it is good. And he's so thoughtful and inspiring. I mean, he talks about, the title of the book, There's No Time Like the Future. Like you've got somebody that with a very, very debilitating disease saying it just progressively gets worse. And he's saying there's no time like the future. Like that's just unbelievable. And so it's just stories from his life, but it's kind of infused with sort of that Michael J. Fox hope, which is really a beautiful thing. So I'm maybe halfway through that right now. I'm really enjoying it. The other one I've just started. I think it's going to be amazing. It's Day Trading Attention by Gary Vee. And man, Gary Vee is just like I didn't love him for a while. I've come around on him, and now he's probably one of my favorite creators. He's just very bullish on creating massive amounts of content that people love on social media. And it's all about creating quality content. And he talks a lot in the beginning about the difference between where social media has been, where you see the content of your social network versus where TikTok has taken social media, where you see the content that interests you. And those are very, very different approaches to content on social media and the way it's distributed. And the whole landscape is changing because of that. And because of that, whoever has the best content can win. I mean, he makes the point, like you can get on TikTok tomorrow and you can post a video that can get 2 million likes and views. And then the next day you can post another video that gets 14. And it's going to almost entirely be based on the quality of that video. And like never before in the history of the world has that been the case. So it's a really interesting and very compelling book so far. I'm really liking it.
Are you reading it or listening to it?
I'm reading that one. I'm taking lots of notes, lots of highlights, and trying to very meticulously read that.
Obviously, he's great at reading his books.
Yeah.
He's one of the best speakers. He's one of the best speakers I've ever seen. Like I've seen him talk a few times.
Yeah.
I've read several of his books. Not to do too far of a diatribe, but what started to turn me off from him was a few years ago. He was talking about how the way that he sort of manages his time with his family. And he was basically saying, because of how much I work and I'm traveling and all these things, what I do is like for basically 2 weeks, I don't see my kids, but then I give them a ton of attention in a weekend. And that's how he does it. Right. But he was saying he actually thinks that's the better way to parent.
Yeah.
And so as you and I both know, his audience is mostly young men.
Right.
And so that's
a dangerous message.
I'm like, look, if you've made that decision, great, do it.
Yeah.
But don't tell all these men that's the better way to parent.
Yeah.
And his point was like, most of you parents, you're around your kids every night, but you're not really engaging with them. So this is the better way to do it. And I'm like, dude, you're just trying to justify that.
So that also
focusing on your business, great, but don't tell people that's the better way.
And that's actually part of what turned me off to him originally too. Is like he was very like there was this big hustle culture movement where it's like work 24/7, kill yourself to build your business. And I feel like he's turned a corner where he's a lot more measured, a lot more thoughtful, and doesn't seem to kind of adhere as much to that idea anymore. And I hope that plays into his family life. I don't know for a fact that it does, but my hunch is that it does, and that he probably is shifted away from what you just described, based on what I'm hearing him say now, but who knows? So yeah, that was what originally like made me like, I can't stand this guy. And now I'm like, okay, he's doing some cool stuff.
His early books were fantastic. I mean, I like a lot of his content. All right. So the two that I'm going to talk about, the books that I'm reading right now, I'm going to tie it to a trip that I just got back from, which was a trip down to the US-Mexico border.
Okay.
I was a chaperone for one of my kids' youth group at church. And so we had like 6 chaperones and 25 kids. And we went down to the southernmost point of Texas, which, by the way, is equal to Miami in terms of its south. You know, it's the southern. It's tied with Miami basically for the southernmost part of the United States, other than the islands. Coast of Florida.
Right.
But yeah, so I think Key West is technically, but the 2 books I'm reading, one is called Bishops on the Border, and the other is called Solito. Bishops on the Border is 5 different church leaders talking about their experiencing trying to help migrants down there, right?
Really?
Most of the nonprofit work done down there is done by a church or another. So if you want to really read about the care that's being given there, that's sort of how you have to do it.
Right.
So that book has been really eye-opening, and I've learned so many things. I'm basically, as I went down there, I'm like, let me bone up on this and read some, read some more.
Right.
And then Solito is by a guy named Javier Zamora, and it's his personal story of, as a 9-year-old, traveling from, I think in Central America up all the way into the United States. And it's like, I'm only to the part where they're about to take the journey, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be harrowing. So anyways, those are 2 books I'm reading to just learn more about that topic.
I'm looking forward to hearing more about those. And I think I'm going to have to add probably that Bishops on the Border to my reading list for sure. So
I think you'll like that one. All right. I had one more thing I wanted to talk about just for a moment. I don't know if you had anything else, but I am, for the last week, I've been trying to do your 1 hour a day reading.
Okay. Nice.
Yep. I every once in a while I'll try to do it. I do it for a few days and then I fall off. So what tips do you have for those of us that want to try to do that?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of quick thoughts. The first is like set a routine about it, right? So like, when are you going to do it at the same time every day? Ideally, you maybe do it at the same place every day. Like that helps a lot. So for me, like I do it first thing in the morning. I make my coffee, I sit down, and then I do my reading, or I do most of my reading. So I'll do usually like 30 to 45 minutes in the morning, and then I'll kind of wrap up and do like a 15 to 20 minutes at night. Usually is just kind of a wind down. The other thing is like, I find that it's helpful to sort of mix up a couple of things and like read a couple things in the morning. So for example, I start with the Daily Stoics. That's a 5-minute read for that morning. And like, there's like, let's say like a devotion or just something to sort of get you into reading is really nice and helpful. Then I also find that it's nice a lot of times where I'll say, okay, I'm going to read this, nonfiction thing for the sake of learning for my first 30 minutes. But then as a treat, I'm going to give myself some fiction reading for the last, 15 or 20 minutes of my reading time. And so it's kind of like something to look forward to. And it sort of splits it up for me a lot, which is nice. That and just like the whole don't break the chain thing. Like I've got a habit tracker.
Right. I was going to say, tell me about the technology you use.
Yeah. I mean, I use an app. I think it's called Habit List. I've used it for years and years and years. And literally you just mark off, did you do that one thing today? And then it tells you like, so for this one, I've got 596 total completions of reading for 1 hour a day. I actually did it more than that before. I didn't start using this app until a couple of weeks in. So I'm not sure the perfect number, but then my current streak of like every single day is 456 days in a row reading 1 hour a day. And so it's a pretty motivating thing once you get past like 10, because it's like, man, it'll take me so long to get past 10 days. Like I got to do it no matter what. So like, I mean, I've been sick and read for an hour a day, and like, it's not great quality reading time. If it's a struggle. I've been tired. I've been, struggling to stay awake and like jerking my eyes open. But nonetheless, it's an hour of reading and I get it done and I don't break the streak. So that's the big thing.
Well, I haven't done my hour today. So
no time like the present.
I got to get going.
No time like the present.
Final thought on all that. It's funny when I talk to people and I tell them, I mean, I'm reading and I put reading in quotes, an outrageous number of books at the same time. Like I probably have 15 right now. I like to load my Kindle up with lots of books, and then I feel in the mood for this one. I feel in the mood for that. But anyways, just a lot of people when they hear, they go, oh, I can't read more than one book at once. And to that, I just want to say, you watch more than one TV show at once.
That's correct. Yes.
Like, it's just the mentality.
When you're a kid, you took more than one class in school at once.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, like, of course, you watch more than one YouTube channel, or more than, like, you could follow all the different TikToks. Like, of course you could follow more than one book. Like, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Agreed. So I think people need to break through that prism. And maybe I have too many, but I do like the idea of like opening up my Kindle and going, all right, there's 8 books I have on here and I'm in certain various phases of each one. Oh, I feel like reading about, this one or the history of the world or whatever. So
I'm normally like 2 to 4 books at a time, like that, like typically really just 2, like really. But yeah, maybe I should expand a little. I mean, why not?
No, I mean, your system works. It may be harder for me to do the hour with so many. Yeah,
that's true. Maybe you're jumping around too much. So could be. All right, Jeff, how can our listeners find and connect with you?
JeffHillemeyer.com is the best way. How about you?
AdamJWalker.com. It's got links to everything.
That's all for today's episode of Who Has Time to Read? Thanks for joining us on this literary journey. If you enjoyed our bookish banter and discovered some new reads, please take a moment to rate us on your favorite podcast platform and share this episode with your friends and fellow book lovers on social media. Your support helps us reach more listeners and keep the conversations going. So until next time, keep turning those pages, and we'll be back soon with more books to share on Who Has Time to Read?